Okay, welcome to this week's episode of the Path Less Chosen, the podcast showing you the careers they don't teach you about in school. My name's Sol.
I'm Jamie.
And this week we have on Tatiana, and Tatiana runs Under the Sheets podcast, which is a podcast discussing the taboo topic of sex and sex education and relationships. She's 100 million views on TikTok and has absolutely taken this world by storm. But Jamie, what can we expect from this week's episode?
Yeah, going to be a really interesting one. I'm looking forward to getting into the conversation with Tatiana and finding out a little bit more about what exactly she does. But I think the kind of three key things that people might be looking forward to finding out is how to have taboo conversations about sex with your grandma, why love stories aren't always realistic, and how to make a journey for yourself and see what road it takes you on.
Love it. Absolutely. I know this is going to be a good episode. Very much looking forward to getting into it. If you are listening, the one thing I'd just love to ask is if you do have the chance to go onto our Instagram and just give us a quick little follow. We appreciate that a lot. We're always putting out great quality reels and also letting you know about the great guests we have on every week. Thanks very much for that. And let's get straight into the episode with Tatiana.
Brilliant. Well, Tatiana, thank you very much for coming on. I know it's early morning here in the UK, so we do appreciate it. I think where we wanted to start and to kind of put you under a bit of pressure, a bit to think to begin with, is if there was one misconception about sex that you could change worldwide, what would it be?
Oh God, what a good question. Thank you so much for having me on, first of all, as well. Right, one misconception. I ask this question all the time as well, and yeah, let me think. I would definitely, God, one misconception. That I think so many people have loads of different ideas on how to have sex for the first time. And I think that however, if you don't feel ready, don't go and do it. And I
Mm.
think that it's so important that it doesn't also have to be special. I think too many people think that it needs to happen um, in like your love story. And I also don't believe that that is the way that
Mm.
it necessarily needs to go if that's not happening for you. I
I
think there's
love it.
too much pressure. I think there's just too much pressure on sex. And I definitely thought, oh my gosh, I need to have fallen in love. And you're told so much on how sex is meant to go. And then as soon as I had sex, I was literally like, oh my God, that is nothing from what I thought it was going to be. And so I feel like everyone builds up this picture that that you think you know what sex is, but I don't think you'll ever really know.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. Smashed it. It's such a hard question to start off with, but we love doing that because it gives people listening right now a great flavor of like the whole episode and what we're going to get into. And I guess like even just taking a step back and being like, okay, why do we ask that question? Obviously, we've already introduced you at the start of the episode, but for anyone listening, just explain like what actually it is that you do and why have we asked you the question that we did?
Yeah, so I am Tatiana. I have been a presenter for a while on my own podcast show where I talk about sex and relationships. It's called Under the Sheets with Dirty Talk. I've got to obviously plug it. And yeah, and so I ask the questions we do and don't know about sex. So I have then recently become a sex educator to help me on that subject when interviewing people about their own experiences.
Wow. And I mean, the obvious question then is how do you get here? I think it's a key question that all of the guests that we have on, we like to find out because it's ultimately for us about encouraging people to go down slightly unusual paths that other people haven't. And I think this this definitely ticks that box, right? So in terms of how you got to where you are now, the podcast and everything, what is the background story behind all of that?
Yeah, so I went to the Brit School when I was 14, I think, and studied there for 4 years. And then the final term, it was in COVID, and we were given. Well, hang on, not yet. I'm yeah, getting ahead of myself. So, 4 years at Brit, the one of the last terms was you can write about anything you like, as a final product, and then if it gets through sort of a competition, then if your play that you've decided to write wins, then it gets played in London on stage. And so I had no idea what I was going to write about. I asked my parents, and they gave me such a shocking idea. And I was literally like, how? I had writer's block, and I'm one for hardly ever having writer's block, I like to believe, and was gutted when I couldn't write on a piece of paper what like anything about this storyline of this family that they thought was a good idea. Very, very basic idea. Anyway, I was really struggling and went to my friends, and everyone was like halfway through their scripts, and it was like the final 2 weeks of getting stuff done. And I said, oh, is there anything, can you give me an idea? I just need to change everything. And they said, well, you seem to talk about sex a lot. Why don't you write about that? And I was thinking, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because at that point I hadn't had sex. So I was also, every time I was talking about sex a lot, because I was thinking, where can I find someone that tells me what to do? You know, where can I get help, and who's had sex, who hasn't? And so I then decided, okay, I'll go with the idea, and I'll write about people's first time sex. So I wrote a verbatim play, which means word for word of what people say. So I interviewed a load of people and then stuck what they had to say into my script, and then decided to create other parts where it was just what was going on in my head, and what I believe sex to be. And then within that, I had sex for the first time, and so I wrote everything about my first time within the play. And I couldn't believe it, but it got as far as it could go, and so was going to be performed in London, and then COVID hit, and I was like, oh, that was I was leaving Brit, and that was like my final thing to be like, right, it's in a play now. I can now go. I'll enter Fringe. I'll go to so many different things, and do something with my script, and get my name out there. And because of COVID, I was literally like, what can I possibly do now? And so, from discussing with my dad as well, he's a big spokesperson in my life and helps me a lot. And he was like, well, why don't leave it here? You know, why don't you, like Paula Yates, she does the Big Breakfast Show. She used to, and that's all done on a bed. And he was like, why don't you run with this idea? And I was like, okay, great, I'll start a podcast and do it. And it was the perfect timing, because I like to think I was one of the first ones to do podcasts as well, because everyone's doing a podcast at the moment. But yeah, so, and then just ran with it. And yeah, it was, what, 4 years later, 5 years later, maybe.
I love that. I love that. And how did it, obviously, like, you're completely right with the podcast thing. How did it feel starting that out for someone listening who, you know, it's so cool that you came up with that idea and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna start a podcast about it. But obviously there's a difference between a play where you get you're kind of, although it's not hiding, you know, there's a script, everyone knows it, whereas you are just putting yourself out to the world in terms of talking about quite a taboo subject within sex, and then having your own podcast and your own name attached to it. So how did that feel to actually start with, or you're like, I'm ready to go?
I think what I've learned over the years is that there is no perfect time to do anything. And if there was a perfect time, I'd still be waiting, and I wouldn't have gone and got it done. I think definitely at the beginning I was thinking, can I do this? This is the first time I am putting myself out there. This is the road that I want to go, because I was studying acting, wanting to go down the route of being, being in front of the camera. But definitely the difference, obviously, of like them presenting and acting. Presenting, I'm being myself, and I'm thinking, am I funny enough? Am I confident enough to be myself and put that out there? And especially when you're showing some of your personal issues, then it's a lot different than pretending you're someone else, you know? And it definitely was one of those things when I was talking about sex, I was thinking, I've had sex once and I haven't had it again because of the way I had my first time. So it was something that I felt very scared, thinking, well, what makes my voice the one um, to be sharing all of this and to be interviewing other people, especially if people had questions for me, if that makes sense. But I definitely felt that I was excited to do it because I wanted to have something that no one else had necessarily done, and I felt like no one had a sex and relationships podcast and started out not knowing much themselves. And so I was thinking, oh, this is amazing. I'm sharing a voice on sex and relationships, and then I realize, and then obviously my algorithm completely changes. So then I'm like, well, everyone under the sun has a sex and relationships podcast, and then I shoot myself in the foot and think, oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah, it's a fascinating answer, and I mean, you touched on it there. Like, why am I like in a position to be able to talk about it myself in my own, given my own personal situation? So, what do you think it was that, I guess, because you got such good traction so early on, and it clearly became something that was resonating with a lot of people. So, what do you think about it was that made that so appealing to people to listen to?
I think it was um, because I felt like I were I feel this is weird because I feel like this is like, I don't mean to talk about myself, but this whole podcast is talking about myself. That it feels very
I think
strange.
that's exactly what we'd like you to do, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Please
yeah,
continue
yeah.
to speak about yourself.
No, I just, yeah, it feels weird that I'm like, I don't know if I'm bigging myself up or not. I don't mean to be, but then also that's supposedly what I'm meant to be doing. Um,
Please,
but
please
I
do that.
I just feel like I was having the conversations that were so taboo and that other people aren't having. And the guests I was having, because I was at a stage that I can't have celebrity guests or just people with names in the lights. I couldn't do that because I was a 17-year-old that knew no one, and I was just asking my friends and family. And so it was definitely one of those things. I was sort of like, no, this really does matter because I've never seen a platform where we're having a conversation about anything to do with sex and relationships, how you grow up in the world making friends. That was also like such a key conversation to have. And I never had seen a platform that I could actually properly get a sex education, but from a completely different angle. That I was talking the highs and the lows, and yeah, if yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting answer. I think I want to go more into that, but one question I had, I think, from when you were talking earlier about when it's set up, you said that obviously you were studying acting at the time. That was a potential like, ambition, I guess, further down the line. So, what was your actual motivation at the time for the podcast? Did you see it as being kind of a thing that you do for a little while, and then obviously it would give you some good stuff for your CV for acting, or was it something that right at the very start you thought, this I could kind of monetize this, it would become a business, and it would lead to years and years of podcasting, basically?
Well, I kind of didn't realize what you could do with a podcast. I kind of just thought, well, this is great because it shows that I've created something of my own. And I'm kind of not going down the usual route as everyone does when becoming an actor. They go to drama school and then you hope that an agent comes and don't get me wrong, like I hope that will happen or happens or happened. You hope that kind of works out, but it doesn't for everyone. And you need to make a journey for yourself. You can't sit and wait. As I said earlier, you need to just get something and see what road this takes you on, because this has taken me on a completely different road to what I ever
Mm.
expected. um and yeah, I didn't really realize there was a way of monetization. I started working with a lady called Zara Janjua, who I absolutely love. And she came on as a producer at one point to help me and mentor me and show me the direction the podcast could go. And that was amazing to suddenly realize, oh, okay, I want to pitch it to TV, and this would be a great way in how I can go about it. I kind of knew, when starting this podcast, I never had, my only sex education I felt like I had was when I was asking, I was asking to my friends, being like, "Oh, how do you?" I find it weird talking about this, but I also hope I'm okay to say this. That I was asking my friends, like, how am I going to give a good blowjob? Like, how do I how do I do this? And they were like, "Oh, have you seen this YouTube channel, Come Curious?" And with Florence Bark and Reed, and I absolutely got obsessed with it and started watching it all the time. And it was just these two girls in a bedroom, not in a bedroom, like wherever they were, just chatting about how to have sex and like tips and stuff like that. And it was just so much fun. And I was like, I'm meant to be having this in school, and I'm not getting this. And because I was so scared to have sex, and after the first time I was then so scared to do it again, that I was like, I need to be having these conversations, because someone needs to have somewhere they can go to and figure out the answers, even though you'll never know all the answers, but have some sort of clue and have some help. And yeah, and I didn't realize, I knew that there's going to be some obvious like thumbnails, some clear TikToks to be made out of my podcast, and so straight away I jumped on the TikTok trend, and I'm so thankful for that, because that's pretty much got me to where I am at the moment as well, because that helps across all platforms. So yeah.
Amazing. There's so many questions in that. Like I want to definitely jump in, and I think we've got a lot to talk about in terms of like almost the same thing we wanted to do, which is plug an education gap that is not there. But just before we even do that, one thing I'd like to touch on is we were unsure of like how has this turned into kind of a moneymaker career from you? Like, how is that something that you do? Because as you say, like, you get into this space and you're like, how the hell am I going to make money and turn this into a career? So maybe someone listening would love to know how you make money, if you don't mind us.
Yeah. So the whole idea, but also I kind of wish I knew. Like it's a constant push at trying to make money. So I don't have all the answers, unfortunately. But so the idea of podcasts is that it's mostly in sponsorships. So you're targeting businesses that will then advertise on your platform. And so that's the biggest way to, I reckon, to be making money, and to be getting products that you can then advertise as well. But then on TikTok, once you're over, oh no, I think it's changed now from when I was. It used to be like over the 10,000 mark, you can then monetize your thing and create a business account, but I don't think it's even that anymore. And it's all done on, if your TikTok is over a minute long, you then get a certain amount from that over a minute video, if it's gone viral, or if it's got a certain amount of views. And then on YouTube again, it's pretty much the same. YouTube, probably out of all of them, is the better payout. But it's one that also needs increasing. I do think, I personally, but I don't know whether that's because, one, I either don't have the figures yet, so I'm not seeing I'm not seeing much at all in there. But you can still tell that'll be the one that makes that could probably make your fortunes. But I also, I feel like there's not enough, but then there's probably other people that go, God, your job is easy and you're making a killing, but I think that I didn't realize how much YouTubers and real makers like work. It's literally a never ending game. I feel stressed constantly.
I don't blame you. I know Sol's much more in that world than I do, but I imagine it is quite stressful, but really useful, hopefully, for people listening, but also selfishly for ourselves. That was honest. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And from your answer before that, it was really interesting to hear that there's actually quite a lot of overlap in terms of what we're trying to do, like what Sol talks about, because I don't think I expected it coming into this podcast, but the biggest thing for us is that at school, people don't talk about the fact that you can do stuff beyond sitting behind a desk 9 to 5. And
Yeah.
like that, it was like our biggest kind of bugbear and why we wanted to start doing that. So people could hear that there's actually like cool careers that you can do. You don't have to be miserable and hate your job. And actually, that's exactly what you're doing. You're covering a gap that school has somehow how missed and
Mhm.
teaching stuff that isn't taught when it should be, really. And obviously now you're very comfortable talking about it. You know, you're doing it every day, really, I guess, in the role you're doing. But I find it really interesting when you were saying like you would speak to family and friends right at the very start of the podcast and things. And I think for a 17-year-old, that's actually quite a big thing. I don't think many people are in that position to be able to have those conversations, like kind of honestly, and also in a way that there's like they're totally confident in having those conversations. So I think my question is kind of two-pronged. Firstly, why do you think that's omitted then in school, and why do they not encourage it to be something that's spoken about kind of normally? And secondly, for anyone listening who maybe felt the same as you in terms of they had emotions like being scared, or kind of nervous to go into talking about sex, let alone having sex, then it'd be interesting to know like how do you overcome that, and how do you get yourself in a position like you are now to be comfortable with everything?
Yeah, I think schools is a funny place because I think it always no matter I personally think that I've realised also whilst doing my sex education course is that whether the teacher's willing to talk about it, it's actually a higher person that's telling them not to. Um, and so I think that is interesting as well, that it also has to go through your parent can make a decision to take you out of those lessons as well. And I think that for me, for I personally think that that should not be the case because these are like really important things you should be learning about sex education. Um, yeah, and I think that there. I kind of think when you get older, I think everyone's the same that you kind of forget how you I mean of course you do like you forget how to be a 13-year-old, you forget what questions you even had at that age, and I think that's the problem, is that you you kind of don't you should be acting young with your children that you're teaching these with, and you should be allowed to laugh. I mean, I still find when I was doing my sex education course, I honestly found it the funniest thing when I was just what we were talking about, and every time I just felt like I was the only one that was like wetting myself the whole time, thinking I can't believe we're talking about just everything, and I have so many questions, and I also felt like sometimes I've got so many questions, and I felt really bad that I was putting my hand up all the time just to ask questions. But I just think that it definitely needs to change. My best sex education, other than obviously watching that YouTube show, but at school was when it was actually at Brit. I thought the sex education actually there was a change, and you incorporated games, and although it might not be the most, oh, it might not be the most, oh, what's the word? Oh, maybe it's not very maybe it's not the most like sensitive way to go about it, but I felt that as a how old was I, 14, 15-year-old, the best way was to do a condom race, and that was so exciting for me, the first one to put on a condom, and you ran from the back of the classroom, and I thought, even though obviously that's definitely not the most sensitive way, but I think you've got to gauge your class and what they're wanting to do and how they're taking on the lessons. And I think definitely you definitely need to be a bit more personal with it. I think a lot of teachers aren't. They're very much like, I'm being told to teach you this and I'm going to talk about everything. I never got told about female pleasure. I didn't realize that women could I didn't realize sex was for women as well. I had no idea. So even when I had sex for the first time,
Mm.
I didn't realize, well, one, I hated it, so maybe let's say a couple more times, that I didn't realize when my friends, they were like, oh, how was it? Did you finish? And stuff like that. I was like, what? Well, like, what do you mean? And so I just had like literally no clue that that was the way. And I think that's so bad. And that's what needs to be incorporated. And that's still what's missing in the sex education system today is talking about female pleasure.
I love
I
that.
don't know if
I
that
love
answers
that.
your
And
questions,
it does. It's so interesting because I mean, like we've had a sex therapist before on this show, and like we find it so interesting. And I guess as Jamie said, it's the whole point about this podcast is to shed light on people like you who are just doing something different. And this is about as different as taboo as you can get from what most people we know are doing, which is the coolest part about it. But I want to know more about like the from yourself, like how was this journey, the highs and lows? Tell us about some of the crazy things you've been up to in the last few months, getting undercovers with famous people, like all this sort of thing. It's must you must pinch yourself and be like, what is going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's insane, but I will still say my best episode with my grandma was just like highlight because
Amazing.
my mum comes up to me and is like, so my mum and dad watch every show, so they're in the audience the whole time. And so
Which is absolutely crazy to me as a
yeah,
concept. Like some of the stuff you talk about, I'd be like, oh my god,
yeah,
that's great. I love that.
yeah. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, so my brothers and my parents are there constantly. And my mum came up to me and was like, "Oh, right, Tats, you've grandma's said yes, but she's just super nervous. So please remember, keep it PG as possible. I don't know where she wants to take it, but she's just very nervous and she's a bit worried, that you're gonna get deep into it." And then, oh my goodness, don't let it go to audience questions because it took a turn. And my grandma, bless her, the sweetest woman ever, who I absolutely love to bits. And I couldn't believe what was coming out of her mouth. I was just like, go grandma, this is amazing. So I do, to anyone listening, you'd go check it out. Honestly, it's so, so good. But yeah, I
We're
mean,
gonna
you just,
send us a link to that, by the way, so we can put that episode out because I'm
uh,
gonna have to listen to it now just so I need to see what this was like.
100%.
yeah, it was just the last 15 minutes, and then she completely forgot what PG meant. She just went, oh my goodness. She changed the definition of PG. Yeah, just honestly, so funny. But yeah, but also thinking that these people that I've had on, so many different people in all different backgrounds, some well known, some not so, but it's the ones that you really, really don't expect, the ones I actually get really nervous about, and I think, oh, do I have anything to ask, do I have anything to say, because I like to get everyone on the podcast, regardless if you've had sex, if you haven't had sex, if you want to talk about your own sexual experience, or whether you don't want to, it doesn't matter, we'll find something to talk about within. What was your education like when you were younger? How has social media changed throughout the years when it comes to sex and relationships? So it's one of those things where I get super nervous and thinking, what can I do this? Do I have any questions? But it's always the ones that you kind of don't expect, to be amazing, and to be the dark horses also. The quiet ones, oh, they've got something going on in the bedroom.
That's a brilliant answer. And I think I've been considering what you said when you were 14, 15, the fact that your hand was always up. I imagine it's always easy, particularly because of the topic, but also how you're coming across now. I'm sure there's always like incredible kind of questions that you can get into and that you don't really ever expect where it's gonna take you. But one thing we did speak about prior to the podcast was you mentioned that sometimes there's a few different pressures and stuff that come with what you're doing as a career now, and maybe a sense of imposter syndrome sometimes. So I think it'd be interesting, obviously, with a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, because it's always a rarer career path that not many people know about. Often people aren't able to share these experiences going down this kind of path. So it'd be great if you're able to shed a bit of light on how you feel around those kind of things.
Yeah, so I think there are two things for me. So basically, one is that I'm a presenter, and going down that route, but also secondly that I'm talking about sex. So one of the things as a presenter is that um, is that obviously I'm putting myself out there, and so it is when I started, I was a 17-year-old that was one talking about sex that I didn't have any. I was coming from a position that I had, these are the questions that I have myself, and so I didn't have um, sort of any. I didn't have any experience whatsoever, and you can completely see that in my podcast as well. The first episode, you can see me completely. I'm I'm not listening to the answer. And I'm very much thinking, right, what's my next question? What's my next question? And you can see me doing that. And then you completely see how the podcast has changed. And especially through my haircuts as well, because I've gone through a few. So I'm going through changes in my journey with my podcast, and it's also great to see when I look back on it. So yeah, I feel like that is one of those things that I then now I'm on this podcast, and this I feel like this is my first podcast I've been on. Woohoo! So thank you very much. But also, I feel very. Am I meant to be here? Do I have something to say? I was at an award ceremony last year. Amazing to be shortlisted for the Be Creator Awards, and I went, but it was very much like, do I even know do I know what I'm talking about? Do I know what being a presenter is? Am I allowed to use this that as I'm a presenter and that I have my own show? And it's very much it is one I just and it just makes it all worse when you just feel like you shouldn't be there. And you kind of you when you're at home and you're with your family, obviously like everyone's telling you you're doing great, you know and and you think, oh no, this is great, the next thing, this is going to lead to that and everything, and then you go into situations where everyone is doing the same thing as you, and you're like, well, what makes me so different? And I think that's like really challenging, because obviously we are the path less chosen, but then you realize there is actually a lot of people that are doing this, and I thought I took pride in the fact that I thought I was the only one, and now everyone's and loads of people are going into a different route, which is so amazing as well, and there should be more, obviously. It's just only because the rooms I put myself in. But yeah, so that's one of the things that is really, really difficult, because yeah, you just feel like, and the pressure is also on more that you're having to produce content and you have to get it out there. And also, if for the day that people are coming to the studio, I am performing the whole time and wanting it to go with a swing, and if it doesn't, then that's on me, and yeah. So I think that is I my biggest thing, and I think that is what I get so nervous about, is that I'm always constantly worried that I'm going to be ill and not be able to make it through the day, and I'm going to have to be
You're
like,
like
right,
you're the bottleneck, right? It's like you are the person that everything has to
yeah,
go through because everything hinges on that.
yeah,
100%. Yeah,
exactly. So I constantly think, well, what if I'm doing a podcast and I need a wee, or I need to be sick, and so I'm constant, and that's all that's going through my mind, and then I'm constantly making reels, editing the podcast, doing loads of different things that that then adds a pressure. And actually, I need to think, when I think, oh my God, I haven't posted a reel today. Is anyone going to notice? No. And that's what I'm constantly thinking. Oh my goodness, there's so many things I haven't done. But yeah, realistically, the likelihood of actually someone properly noticing is, you know, and then back to what I was meant to be saying. So when it comes to talking about sex, is that a lot of people have impressions of me. People think that I'm this crazy sex lady, and have had loads of sex and do so many crazy things. And I just find it really hilarious. And because it's just so not true. And I have so many questions, and I ask so many questions even to my friends, like still now, and everything on the show I'm asking because I have absolutely no idea what that means, whatever crazy thing that's coming out someone else's mouth.
It's cool though
So
because
yeah,
you've made an avenue for you to be able to learn more and somehow then get paid for it. Which I think, as someone said this to me the other day, was like, if you can get paid or like make a career out of learning, it's beautiful, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, it's amazing. Um, but yeah, definitely. And it's just it's funny because people either expect me to talk about sex all the time, but I feel like now I probably more do than I didn't because obviously it's my career. So I kind of if someone asking me about my job, I have to go into sex. But otherwise I think people almost or either I found that when I went out a lot it was very much like oh she'll be easy or something
Mm.
because as soon as I always held off on tolding that on tolding that doesn't make sense I always took a step back at telling people what I do and what my podcast is about, because I knew that they would then have an opinion with me that they either wanted to, like, that someone would want to sleep with me because of it, or would think of me of certain things, and
Wow.
yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, most definitely. No, it's a really like interesting way to finish because I think a lot of people wouldn't maybe consider that though that kind of what comes with it, right, as well. And it's amazing to hear how you deal with it. So I'm conscious obviously of your time. I think what we always like to do in terms of finishing with the last question is just seem to always extract some really interesting answers, and I'm kind of keen to get into what you make of it all. So if you were to go back, and I think we always like to pick a time as well, maybe to go back into when you first created that script around the first time you had sex, for example, it'd be good to know from that point forward, what's one thing you'd have done the same, one thing you'd have done differently, and one thing you'd tell yourself to motivate yourself.
Um, yeah, so one thing I'll do the same is that I'm pleased that I took the plunge. Like I'll do it all over again. I think it's kind of hard to say what I'll do differently because everything I've done, obviously there's loads of um failures within that. Or I shouldn't say failures, but there's so many things that obviously go wrong, but you still have to hit those um to even to take two steps forward, you know. So yeah, it's one of those things that doing the same is actually taking knowing that what you've got to say is is important, and what you want to do as well. Like if I was in a another job, I'd know constantly that I wouldn't be happy, and I'd always think, oh, I wanted to be a presenter, and I'm not doing it, you know. And yeah, so that's in the whole idea of the path less chosen is that you've got to do it, because
Love
once you're
that.
there it's amazing. um and then what I'll do differently is that um I would take in um the small the small celebrations, the small wins, sorry, that's the word, because there's a lot that you kind of I hit um like 10,000 followers, and then I was like, oh, right, now it's 20,000. You know, now I need to get to the next milestone. And you kind of
Mm.
didn't take in I was very lucky to have at that time I was traveling, and it was very nice to have my friends also that kind of help me celebrate, but I definitely, in my head, I could have been like, okay, no, I can sit on this for a while. I don't have to constantly be thinking, right, okay, next thing, this isn't good enough. It's starting and now I need to keep going. And it's important to take a step back and think, okay, why is it going well? And what could I do that's better? Within within those small milestones, if that makes sense. Um,
And
yeah,
then
and then was there
one thing to motivate yourself.
one thing to motivate myself. Oh yeah, even when you doubt your impact, your voice is being echoed where you don't even know. And I would
Mm.
trust that.
That's an absolute banger last line. I love that because that's great because I couldn't agree more. Like you're putting stuff out content wise. I found that for ages and definitely I think Jamie and I are always surprised with our pod as well. So yeah, I love that and it is such a good message to anyone who's looking to get into that content game and put stuff out there and they have no idea if it's going to work. It's like yeah, you won't know. But yeah, such a good message. I love that one. Cool. Well, like honestly, Tatiana, that was amazing. I think like learned a lot about the podcast, but B, also like the inside of the life of what it takes to actually run that podcast. So I'm sure anyone listening has learned a lot as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so
We will,
much, honestly.
no, yeah, no worries at all. And we'll put all the links to your podcast, to where people can find you on socials in the description. So if you're listening, please do check Tatiana out. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, guys. Honestly, so nice to meet you.
Brilliant. Yeah, fascinating episode, Tatiana. Some really cool topics covered and hopefully interesting for everyone to listen to. I think plenty of good takeaways. The obvious one for me, and when she said it, it was, I wrote it down very quickly. It was around there's no perfect time to do anything. And if you don't do it, you'll just still be waiting. And we might have spoken about sex for 40 minutes or whatever it is, but obviously the purpose of this is to give people good career advice and how to explore something they're actually going to end up enjoying doing. And I think that message is applicable across the board. Doesn't matter what you're doing, that just do it. There's no point waiting for that perfect time. And yeah, I thought that was a very nice takeaway to start with.
Yeah, that's 100% the difference between people who do well or not, is the people who do well just get started. Yeah, my takeaway, actually, I'm just gonna have to repeat what she said at the end, because I could not agree more than that. Because like me and you right now, it feels like we're kind of just speaking to each other and we don't know who we're speaking to. And I had that with my content for ages, and it's very cool that she mentioned that as well, which is like, you just don't know who you're speaking to. And with media, you just have to stay consistent and do it over the long term, and it will work. And that is it's an amazing message. She shows that it's an amazing message, but it's also like resonates so strongly with me. So I loved that the takeaway is, if you're putting media out there, just, you have no idea who is listening.
Yeah, definitely. I did like that as a final one. She smashed that last answer for sure. And then I think the final one that I would go for is how to be confident that you've actually got something important to say. Because I think she's talking about it in a context where if you're having a conversation around something that's maybe taboo or a sensitive topic or something that's tricky to talk about, sometimes there can be a general feeling that you don't really have the authority to be able to speak on it. And the way that she comes across and how comfortable she is with talking about a topic that a lot of people will find difficult to talk about, it shows that she's put herself in a position where she's now given herself that confidence, and she understands whichever guest is put in front of her, she will be able to deliver what's, one, an engaging podcast for people to listen to, but two, what's also just a fascinating conversation to have with a guest that she's speaking with. And I think, again, something that's applicable across a few careers. You know, if you're going down a slightly different route that you might not have heard too many people talking about, and then you have this kind of sense of imposter syndrome that you don't feel confident in saying what you've got to say, actually there's a point where you just need to become comfortable in what you know, and feel like you're able to deliver that and that people will listen to you, and actually you can be quite engaging. So I thought that was a bit of like a inspirational, motivational comment for people that might not feel like they belong where they are, but you really do have something important to say, and I like that.
I love that. Yeah, I love that, man. Nothing to add. Everyone has something important. Everyone has value to add to the world. Amen to that. So to wrap that up, there's never a perfect time to start. You never know who's listening, and you have value to the world. You just need to find it. Unreal episode. Love that a lot. Massively like tough one for us to do, but like tough in the way that it's just like this podcast keeps delivering great episodes with interesting topics and interesting guests, and Tatiana was a great example of that. So loved it, love what she's up to, and thank you very much for taking the time to listen to the path less chosen.